Ali, to the Art of Listening podcast. I'm very excited to welcome you here and have this beautiful conversation with you. You are an astrologist, but you're also a somatic healer, and I feel you do so many beautiful things, and I really love how you weave it all in. So if you want to give yourself a small introduction so people know what you do, where you're based, and yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a gift to be able to connect when we're in such different places in the world. I'm so excited to be here. I am an astrologer, so I practice astrology, kind of a unique form of astrology that I've come up with over the years, but it weaves evolutionary astrology and embodied astrology in, based upon my somatic healing training. And yeah, I'm based in Topanga Canyon, which is just outside of Los Angeles in California. And I've been doing this work since 2019. So it's been, this specific type of work, at least. I started astrology earlier than that, but it's been such a beautiful journey to be able to navigate this threshold that we're in as a human species and this consciousness upgrade that we're moving through. Yeah, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, I would actually start with your personal journey. What brought you to astrology? And yeah, I'm very excited to have you on and have a little astrology deep dive, as I personally love it. And I studied this as well. And I know there are so many different, even nowadays, I feel in social media, there's so much input and so much about astrology. If you could share more about your personal journey and also your journey towards the somatic healing.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, my personal journey, I came to this work in my mid 20s when I was also navigating a rupture. I think like many of us, we come to this work when we are navigating our own personal experiences and our own personal awakenings and upgrades as well. And it really started with some sort of external experiences. So things within my family that were happening where I was noticing how much anxiety I was holding. My dog, who was my soul dog, was sick, and he had like a rare type of cancer. He was only, I think, like 6 years old. And so I was bringing him to these different doctors, and I just noticed how I sort of reached a point where I was like, oh my gosh, I really need support, in moving through this and understanding what I'm experiencing. I was also working as a recruiter, and which was, interestingly enough, way out of alignment for me. And while I was a recruiter, I was doing these personality assessments, basically, when we were bringing people in. And so we would talk about, they would basically do this test, and we would look at the test that they completed, and it would map it out as this personality type, basically. And then we had sort of an ideal map for the role that we were hiring for. And if those two overlapped, there was obviously a higher likelihood that we would hire them for the role. And what was fascinating is when I did my personality test for my role, they were total opposites. So I was much more of a, sort of introverted, introspective, deep feeler, sensitive person. And I was in this role where I had to be really extroverted. I had to be selling something, I had to be in this energy that really just wasn't authentic to me. And so that was a wake up call. And I was like, how could I be working in this type of environment for so long, living, essentially inauthentically for so long and still be functioning and okay. And so that was a wake up call for me. And I also loved learning about people and how they were wired and understanding why we do what we do, and the fact that everyone's wired so differently. And so that brought me into, psychology and understanding human nature and why we do what we do and how we're wired, and, our experiences and how they shape us. And then that merged with my spiritual awakening, basically, and it brought me straight to astrology. And so I had always liked astrology. I was fascinated by it, but I didn't see it. I saw it sort of as something that was outside of us, or something that was predictive in nature. And it wasn't until I started really understanding that it is more so a way to understand who we are and why we're here and our connection to God. And that just brought me into this deep, deep study. And yeah, that was sort of the initiation into this journey. And then I was working with a lot of different astrologers and healers and intuitives, and they kept saying, you have to do this work. If you don't do this work, your life will implode. And things did. They really started falling apart. I went through a divorce at 30, which was, pretty wild experience to navigate, my Saturn return and a divorce at the same time. And my life was crumbling, and it wasn't crumbling because, I was doing something wrong. It was crumbling because it really wasn't in alignment anymore. And that catapulted me into this work even further. And I really, I had a lot of trauma points that were coming up. I had some medical trauma as a child, and it just was something I couldn't move through, anymore without really acknowledging, which I think is the nature of this journey, is that we kind of land in these different points in life, and our experiences reemerge when they're ready to, when we have the right resources and environment and conditions to process them, to become closer to those parts and, integrate further as a self. But so yeah, I ended up going through divorce. I spent some time in Europe and kind of went through this reclamation process of self, and it was really intense and wild at the same time. And then ended up driving out to LA and moved out here with my dog in the end of 2019. And that was an initiation as well, because I was alone and COVID unfolded, and it was just, I was living in Topanga by myself with my dog Arlo, and that just really further, really deepened my studies, and my business started growing from that point, my work. And it's been very dynamic. And now I'm, in a deeper layer of understanding the nervous system and the body and somatics, and really how all of this is interconnected, at the same time, astrology and somatics. And I'm also in the second trimester of pregnancy. So I have a little eclipse baby that emerged this year too. So it's very exciting. It's been a journey, but it's all, really led me exactly where I need to be.
Yeah, beautiful. And it's so interesting how life sometimes keeps knocking on our door, especially when something is out of alignment, and how we naturally actually always evolve into the direction that we're meant to evolve. I want to dive a bit deeper into how we can use astrology as a map back to the self. Because for me personally, I love to use astrology as a source of empowerment and guidance, rather than putting my power outside of it. And it's what you said, right? Predictive, like this is going to happen in your life, but you still have a choice, but that we could actually use it for deeper clarity, and then walking that path of alignment instead of staying in something where we maybe thought we have to walk that path because we've maybe seen or learned it when we were younger, but coming back to our own authentic nature.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think the way I see our birth chart, the way I see astrology in general, is just, one, it's the energetic climate from the perspective of Earth, so we have our Earth perspective, of course, where we come from and where we live and exist here in this incarnation. But the way I see our personal birth chart is that it is our soul blueprint, so it's essentially an imprint of who we're meant to be in this lifetime, what we're meant to learn, what we're meant to integrate. It's in so many ways sort of, it's a map, it's a roadmap, but it's also a guide to really understand who we are. And so what I believe is that when we come into this life as a soul and we choose this incarnation, we choose this body, we also know what we want to work on. We know the pieces and parts we're here to experience, and the different lessons we're here to learn, and the experiences we're meant to have. And so I think the birth chart really is an imprint of that. So each and every celestial body or planetary placement is there for a very specific reason. It's there to give us a specific type of experience, to shape our personality in a way so we will meet the people we're meant to meet. So we'll do the type of work we're meant to do. And so that choice point, that piece that we're the time we choose to come in, the location we choose to come in, the date we choose to come in is all very specific. It has a specific imprint so that we can become who we're meant to become. And so I see it more as an imprint, more as sort of like a story. It's living and breathing, of course, because it's always interacting with the current sky and our current journey. But when we think about those planetary imprints, they tell us who we are, and who we're meant to be here. And so I think it could tell us about the past and the future. Time isn't linear, but still, when we think about where we've been or the type of energy we're bringing into this lifetime to help influence this lived experience, I think as souls, we come here in this specific incarnation on Earth in particular to learn quite a bit, to grow and evolve in certain ways. And when I think about Earth School, if we want to call it that, it's like there's quite a lot that happens here. And so these different imprints help us to have those experiences in the ways we're meant to have them. So we can have, this imprint, this soul blueprint. And then of course, so that's not fixed by any means, but it gives us sort of an essence or an energy, or gives us the opportunity to embody that. But then, of course, we come into this life and we're birthed into this quite dense physical reality, and we have conditioning and environmental impacts on, who we are and our personality, our nervous system, our psyche. We receive imprints from our environment too. So we have this alchemizing together, our soul blueprint, and then, of course, our lived experience here. And so really, I think the journey of this lifetime is to return back to that soul essence, that soul blueprint over and over again, and become more of it throughout time. And, I do so many different readings for people, and I work in healing containers with women as well. And what I notice, I always start my longer containers with an astrology reading. What I notice is that we either have a lot of intimacy with our chart, and even if we've never seen it before, we have a lot of intimacy with it. We understand it. It's like a remembering. That usually means we're connected to ourselves. We're connected to our intuition. We have a sense of who we are. There's some sort of connection to the self. And then I've read for other people where so much of it is foreign, and it feels like very confronting, right? Because they're at a place in their lives where they're maybe just starting on this path where they're, returning back to self, and it feels very confronting how far off the path they've come. But really, it's just, I think, can be a roadmap back to you, back to your true soul essence, your soul blueprint, why you're here, what you're here to become, how you're here to heal, who you're here to meet, all of those things. And so it's this coded imprint that we can work with, all the time to just become more and more authentic, more intimate with our true self.
Yeah. And what were your key aha moments when you look back at your personal journey and you started to go deeper into astrology and then also starting to interact with your personal chart? What were a few revelations that you had that you maybe always sensed in your being, in your body, but then seeing it actually in your chart that supported you in further clarity or walking a different path than you have done in the past?
Yeah, I love that question. I think we probably all have these revelations when we come to our charts, or, maybe a remembering that had been long forgotten, or permission, even in a way, something that a shadow part that we had been rejecting for most of our lives, and seeing it in our charts, being able to actually just reclaim that and say, okay, this is a part of who I am, and it can be okay. For me, there was so much, growing up, I had so much rejection of my many different parts. I grew up in a really small town and a Sag moon, and I just felt so restless and kind of really sort of numbed to my existence and where I was. And I went through a lot of, like I said, medical trauma as a child too. So there was just so much there was so much fragmentation that I really had to work through. So coming to my chart for the first time, it felt like light bulbs. It felt like everything just started turning back online, and it was almost addicting, in the beginning, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm receiving this permission for the first time potentially ever, and it feels so good. And there was also a really deep remembering for me too. I had been working with a mentor, an astrology mentor, and I remember he told me, he's like, you've done this in many past lives. This is something you're a master at astrology, but have forgotten in this lifetime, and that's part of the journey, of course. But I remember it just sort of downloaded, and I'd seen all these lifetimes. I lived in Egypt and different ancient civilizations doing this work, and it was so amazing. But for my personal chart, some of the revelations, one, my North and South Node, which I love working with, and I created a course solely based around these two because I think that they're so helpful when really understanding our soul's purpose and why we're here and how to work with it. But I'm a South Node in Virgo, and for me, that was so revelatory to understand the patterns that I really don't love about myself, and how they were taking hold of my life and really hijacking my relational field. And my South Node in Virgo conjunct Venus in Virgo, and so there's a lot of past life karma relationally for me, and a lot of things I've had to work through in this lifetime, related to relationships and control and perfectionism and this desire to be in control over certain things. And so that South Node of Virgo has been one of my great teachers. It's also been I think the South Node is, it can reveal our shadow self and our shadow parts, but it also reveals our greatest gifts, and what we've done many times and what we really understand. So for me, understanding that this lifetime I'm not here to grip and control or have everything in perfect alignment, or even work in these really tedious ways. I'd done more tedious work in my early life, and having my North Node in Pisces, this life is about being free, and experiencing joy and living a spiritually led life and being a healer, and being near water too. That was such a thing for me because I came from the middle of the US. So it was like 12-hour drive to get to any ocean body. And so when I moved to LA, I just felt this exhale of, oh my gosh, the water is such a healer for me and such a teacher and such a resource. And so, but yeah, that gave me such permission to just let go of control, to surrender. I mean, it's so much easier said than done. Surrender is like my forever teacher. But, there was this permission right off the bat that, hey, this is your path. And the thing that's kind of been calling you, the piece that's the scariest, right, is the leap of faith and the surrender and the trust. That's actually your greatest teacher, and that's your North Star. And so that was a revelation. Also, Pluto in my first house was a revelation because there was just my Scorpio rising, there was so much shadow around that, around the parts of me that are intense. I'm a Libra, so it's like my shadow, that Pluto in Scorpio felt so shadowed to me in the beginning of my life, and I was, carrying shame around intensity or density or darkness, and that's been a long journey of integrating that and seeing it actually as my superpower, and what makes me good at the work that I do too. So.
Yes. Yeah, and essentially shining a light on it, right?
Yeah.
Seeing it and knowing like, okay, it's there, it's present. I always sensed it within me. I might have rejected it. And yet how can I actually integrate it? And that's why I personally also love to work with a chart, because everything that you shine your awareness or your light on, then you can start integrating that instead of pushing it down. Because pushing it down would just suppress it, but it will be still present there, this nagging feeling.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, it's an amazing tool and resource, I think, even for anyone who does any type of guidance or support and helping people, integrate more of their unique, authentic self, because it is like quite literally a snapshot or a roadmap for our most pure essence,
Yeah, because you shared about the North and the South Node, and I love it as well. If you could just give a small framework to it for people that heard it the first time, a time, or maybe they heard it already before, but they don't really know how to pinpoint that. And even for themselves, if people are inspired after this call to look at it and see, okay, how can people work with it, and also knowing that's not like a one-time thing, but actually as you evolve, you will also move naturally into the direction of your North Node.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that, you know, well, one, astrology can be overwhelming, right? You look at your chart and it's like a totally different language. And there's, for me, the first time I looked at it, it felt like an ancient, symbolic language of sorts. And it is, quite frankly, it is. But if you're interested in astrology and you might feel overwhelmed, by understanding your whole chart, I always say one of the best places to start, especially if you're, interested in evolutionary themes and self-development and growth and healing, is the nodes, the North and South Node, because they are this one. I think they really tone the rest of the chart, because they tell us so much about our karma and our dharma and where we've been and where we're headed in this lifetime. And so they can give us sort of just a very clear snapshot of why we're here, and like you said, they're not just something that is sort of imprinted and we just, it is just what it is. It's something that's living and breathing, and I call it they're the compasses, so the South Node it tells, one, I think the North and South Node, they are meant to be balanced. So it's not that we, let go of the South Node and release it, but we integrate it, and then we integrate the higher expression of the North Node as much as we can. So it's meant to balance and harmonize these two opposing forces. And the nodes are always opposite one another in your chart. So they're always opposing signs. So there's this duality and this alchemy that occurs when we can really access the medicine of both. But the South Node tells us where we've been in many lifetimes, what we've done in many lifetimes, what we're really good at, what we've mastered. It doesn't necessarily mean, if you have a South Node in Leo, that you have been a Leo in many lifetimes, but it means that you've embodied those qualities of Leo. Maybe you've had significant Leo placements, or you've been, a person of influence, or a person who's been in the public eye, or it's been a lot, like you've done a lot of work around being seen, being heard, the self. Many of your lifetimes were focused on you. And this lifetime, you're meant to be more focused on the whole, the greater whole. When we think about the axis of Leo and Aquarius, it's, which is interesting because this is the axis we're moving into in July, but it is like it's the self and the collective, the center of you and the greater group. And so the North Node in Aquarius is calling you into group work and collaboration and letting go of things that are more in the shadow ego and embracing how you can be part of a greater whole, philanthropy, things like that, creating new systems. So the South Node tells us where we've been and what we've done and what we've mastered, what we're really good at, but it also shows our shadowed parts. And I always say that the South Node is sort of like our subconscious. So it's what we default to, what's really easy for us, what we naturally default to without thinking. And the North Node is not that. It's not our comfort zone. It's not what we are really good at or what we've done in many lifetimes. Even though there are sort of overlapping themes, that might be a growth edge place for us, like where we have to kind of place conscious awareness there in order to grow into that, so it's not our natural default, but it's the growth edge, and it's where we get to lean and place conscious awareness so that we can grow into a more evolved version of us. So South Node, it's our gifts, it's what we're really good at, but it's also where, we might get comfortable and become, trapped in these familiar patterns that aren't serving any longer. And then the North Node is our North Star. And so I think daily I'm always kind of thinking about, especially because I'm in my nodal return right now too, but how deeply am I in my South Node shadow? Am I gripping, controlling, wanting things to be perfect, getting frustrated when they aren't? Am I controlling other people with my Venus conjunct there? Am I, controlling my partner? Where am I gripping too hard, And then how can I just move with the waves? The waves of Pisces, this more conscious space, quite frankly. Pisces is the 12th sign of the zodiac, so this is a big evolutionary leap in this lifetime. So, yeah, I think that we can work with the nodes daily. It's something that we can always be conscious of. And the more conscious thought we bring to it, the more we grow, because we're working with it consciously and we're bringing awareness there. And so it just psychically opens up so many channels.
Yeah, totally. And I can also see it in myself. I have my South Node in Aries, which is definitely a comfort zone of mine to do things alone, having a hard time asking for help, but I'm practicing that, moving more into the collaboration of Libra. But yeah, definitely, even as a child, I always like sports that you do alone, not really like group sports. And I can push through things, which I know.
Yes.
And it's my comfort zone, but learning how to rest essentially, which is Libra in some ways, but I guess it's also even my Virgo rising, right? It's being also this detailed, things don't have to be super perfect, but softening there.
Yeah.
And I find this is actually a great power or tool to use it and to know that, because you can see the pattern, and we all know that we have our own pattern for the good and for the not so good, let's say it like that. But knowing that, so we can see them playing out in our day-to-day life, I find even with that being gentle to ourselves. Not trying to, as you said, that it's finding a balance between the North Node and the South Node, and not being like, okay, now I have to be only in that direction, but rather how can I integrate both and find the balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it really is. I think, something beautiful about astrology and the North and South Node in particular is that it can bring self-compassion, where you can just see, okay, this is why I do those things. And it's not just because I'm, stubborn or selfish or whatever it is, right? It's like there's an evolutionary purpose here, and it's pushing me out of the shadow aspect of that, but that I can have compassion for that because there's a reason why I am that way. And but yeah, like having that South Node in Aries, the beauty of it is that you're self-led and decisive and a good leader, right? But then it's like softening it with some of the balance of Libra, which is meant to truly harmonize energy and bring, relational work into the field, which can be so helpful for an Aries for sure. So
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Are you personally using or looking at the houses in regards to the North Node? Because I
Totally.
know it's a year, or because let's say people born in the same year might have the similar North and South Node, but then the houses do give more context, right?
Yeah, that's what is so fascinating about astrology is that sometimes say it's like a lasagna, it's layered. Like we can spend our entire lives studying our own chart and
Yeah.
never crack all of the codes of it. But yeah, it's living and breathing. So every minute things are changing and shifting. And so, the North and South nodes shift every 18 months. And so, a lot of times the people you grew up with in school or in class, you have a similar North and South node with, but it can express totally different depending on your chart. So depending on the house placement, of course, depending on what other planets they're connected to, personal planets or outer planets. Like I said, my South Node is conjunct my Venus. So that gives it a very unique, tone. It's not just, if it was conjunct my Mars, for example, it'd be much different, but it's conjunct my Venus. So it has its relational tone to it, and tells me, our South Node also tells us our karma, like where we've been in many lifetimes. It's a very karmic placement. So, when it's transiting somewhere we're going through, it's connected to eclipses. So it's what determines the eclipse cycle too. And so when we're talking about eclipses, they are karmic. And so there's a lot of this that is about surrender and release and letting go too. But yeah, having, your South Node in the first house is totally different than having it in the eighth house, for example, so that's what's cool about astrology is you can continue to go deeper and peel back the layers and understand the nuance more and more.
Yes. And as you're also somatic healer and you do a lot of somatic practices, how do you connect astrology and the somatic practices? And because I know also you weave them in and you use them together. But what was your initial inspiration for that led you to combine these things?
Yeah, necessity was the initial inspiration. I was very disconnected from my body growing up. I think it's, just, from my medical trauma, and I have Pluto in the first house. So there's, of course, that. So much of my healing work and karmic work in this lifetime is related to the body as well. So, I think for me, from what I understand is about the nervous system and how our physical form works, is things get stuck when we don't have the right conditions to process them in the moment. So either they're too big, too intense, we don't have the right support, we're alone, isolated, we're too young, we don't have the developmental, capacities to process them. And when we do, they start to arise and surface. And that's a very plutonic event. And so I had a very plutonic experience. I think, what was it? I can't remember the transit. Now I feel like I'm having amnesia because I want to forget it, but it was such an intense Pluto transit. I think it was Pluto squaring my ascendant or something. I can't remember exactly. But I was brought into this massive healing crisis and I had to go into it. And what I found was that talk therapy wasn't working and subconscious work wasn't working. And all these things that I'd done that were much more familiar and safe for me because they were very cerebral and sort of outside of the body weren't working. And what did work was somatic healing. And so, very simple touch integration of self, working with the body, familiarizing myself with actually being in the body for the first time in a long time. And so it was my own work that once again brought me into this. But then once I started really obviously deepening into my own work, then I wanted to study it because I was like, I think somatics in particular right now are so huge because I think they're the bridge between science and spirituality. Because science is so focused on the here and now. It's so focused on facts and the physicality, right? Like what we can touch and feel and prove. And spirituality is the opposite. It's the unseen. It's what we can't prove necessarily. It's what we can't touch with our physical, touch with our hands and really feel physically sometimes, but usually not. And so there's a belief there. There's a faith there, right? And so as we are in this evolution of consciousness as a species, this golden age, this upgrade, I think what we're struggling with most is this bridge between the physical and the spiritual and how we reckon with the fact that so much is not known and how can we be okay with that. So I believe that somatics is that bridge because it's very energetic, but it's also very physical. And so I think in many ways, we come here in this lifetime, probably, hundreds of lifetimes before and after this specific one we're in right now, we've come to help the physical body upgrade. Our consciousness is upgrading. That's just built into the evolution of our species. But the earth is upgrading too. And that means because we are physical matter, we're organic matter, our physical body is upgrading too because the discrepancy between our nervous systems, which are more wired for a totally different experience in this lifetime. They're quite old. They still function in the way they're meant to, but they're reading data that is not accurate anymore. So as our actual consciousness upgrades, our physical form has to as well in order for us to not be in this dilemma that we find ourselves in currently with, rampant anxiety, depression, violence, things that are just splitting, and fragmenting our reality. So that brings me to this bridge. And what I found is that when we understand why we're here and we understand these different points in our charts and really looking, I just started seeing basically these codes embedded in astrology too, and how I can see the different trauma points people have gone through based upon their chart. For example, like I said, I have a Pluto in the first house. So body, separating from the intensity of life is something I learned very young. Now, my work is to integrate the intensity of life and bring that intensity back in as life force and power and alchemy, right? So, yeah, I just love working with the two of them together. And I do think that the more we bridge the physical and the energetic and the unseen, the more we're going to grow and evolve as a species. And also that, I think through the somatic channels, through the different somatic trainings I've done, I've realized that really all we're looking for is a sense of safety, a sense of belonging, a sense of containment from something larger than us, like God, source, the earth, whatever it is. It's like feeling that sense of belonging, and it has to be physically coded to it. Can't just be in the mind or in the psyche.
Yes, and really coming out of this mind space back into the body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
with
what
your
are,
axis, that's definitely with your
yeah,
nodal axis, that's a
I
big
do
part of
have
your
my
work.
Pluto also conjunct my IC. So it sits on the
Okay.
bottom of my chart.
Dark house, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is very similar to what I'm describing too.
Yeah, it's interesting I don't have any Scorpio placements, but the South Node in the eighth house and then the Pluto there, which I still find, even though I don't have the placements and everyone has each archetype within them, but yet the Scorpio energy is quite familiar to me. I can work with that and I know this energy, so it doesn't scare me because I know a lot of people, it's a typical thing you hear Scorpio and a lot of people are like, oh, you're Scorpio, a bit scared about it.
Yeah.
But essentially coming to understand each archetype and each season that we're moving through to really engage with that archetype and
Yeah.
exploring that within ourselves, even if we don't even have, let's say, any Scorpio placements or
Yeah.
now in Gemini season or Gemini placements.
I love that you mentioned that, because that is, a deeper layer of astrology, is that the houses are imprinted by the different signs too. So having anything in your eighth house gives you the scorpionic essence. My dog is coming to say hi. Yeah. Gives you that to your south node, where you've been in many lifetimes in the eighth house. You've had scorpionic lifetimes, like there's that scorpionic imprint too, which is Pluto as well. Pluto in your IC, like that's a familiarity. That's your deep innermost self. So you are, even though your chart isn't ruled by Pluto necessarily, you have some pretty strong plutonic energy there in Scorpio. And so, yeah, it's fascinating.
And what are some of your simple or favorite somatic practices? Because I'm always a fan keeping it simple and doable, let's say, instead of having too many tools that kind of overwhelm us and then we don't do anything.
I 100% agree. And I love that, because I think the beauty of somatic work is that it can be so simple. So simple. And I think when the intensity of life and the overwhelming amount of stimuli, and Uranus and Gemini, right, we're just going to continue to receive more and more and more and more data and information, and it can be so much. Returning to the simplicity of somatic work is just everything for me. So I always say it really depends on your own system, what works for you. But it's beautiful because you can just try things out, and sort of see what feels right. The earth, I feel, is one of the most stabilizing forces because it's here. We live on it. We're, thank you to gravity, we're connected to it every single moment for the most part, and it has a natural rhythm that is naturally regulating. So its vibration is naturally regulating to us in general. That's why people sit on PEMF mats and, called grounding, right? It's literally just grounding. So I love working with earth and just literally laying on the ground, your back directly on the earth, and just imagining that vibration and feeling those points of contact, like where something bigger and wider and more, even powerful than you can actually hold you, and that you can just feel that sense of holding, that you don't have to do it all, that you don't have to contain everything on your own, and just feeling the power of the earth, connecting with her. That's grounding, but some people might be in a more sympathetic state and that's not what they need. Maybe you're really stressed and the grounding just doesn't do it. It's not like there's a you need to enter a pathway before you enter that space. I love something like shaking or intuitive movement, just like quite literally letting your body show you what it needs, you know? So I do a lot of shaking every morning. You know, I have Uranus and Gemini is quite activating for me. Uranus rules the electrical currents of the body, and Gemini rules, and you know, the central nervous system. So we're in a season of a lot of activation, and so yeah, shaking, moving, discharging some of that energy that's just present, maybe some extra energy that's present, and those two are great. They're two kind of different resources. I also love working with the extremities. So when we're in a heightened state, we usually forget that we have legs and feet and hands and arms, that we have power, that we can push up against things, that we can move things. So if you're feeling angry, just we have some reflexes here in the base of the palm of our hands. My somatic mentor taught me this, but even just pressing, you know, like feeling the power of your arms, all of those bigger muscles turning on to move some of that sympathetic energy.
Yeah.
You know, and then in the feet too, like pedaling your feet, feeling your feet back online, remembering you have a body, remembering you aren't, that it's okay to be here, you know? So it's very simple
Yes.
ones, but you kind of, you know, play around with them. I'm sure many of you have heard them already, but yeah.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think it's even for me living in a city,
Yeah.
making space and time, it's so simple to just lay on the ground, on the earth. But then
Yeah.
if you're in a city, so often I realize even if I feel a bit anxious, then I just go into nature,
Yeah.
and then I often realize, okay, wow, there was nothing wrong in my life or generally something that was so activating that I felt anxious. It was just I was missing nature. And once you go into nature, you're like, but even being so trapped then sometimes in the city, which I love, but it is very activating.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's
making
wild, isn't it?
room and time for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And finding the right, yeah, exactly. Making room and time for it and finding the right space that you feel
Yeah,
connected to. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And now as we move into summer, you already said, I mean, it happened in April, but Uranus moved into Gemini. But overall, you said the nodes are shifting. So I know it's not a forecast, but maybe even what is collectively on the horizon, the energy of summer, because I know there are so many different shifts and we will never know exactly what will happen. We will see then. But yeah, if you could give a little forecast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this summer is wild. You know, there's so many different systems and ideologies that have been talking about this bridge space that we're in, you know, from 2025 really to 2030. And this year in particular is sort of the activation point for all of that. It's where we are activating this string of evolutionary events individually and collectively that will unfold over the next few years and completely change and shift the fabric of our reality, like how we relate, how we engage with life, how we feel in our bodies, how we make money, like all of these things are changing. And so we had that pretty significant event, obviously, the great conjunction between Neptune and Saturn at the 0 point of Aries in February. All of the outer planets have shifted into air and fire this year. They kind of started last year and really the end of 2024 when Pluto entered Aquarius. But the shift of all of these outer planets, which really kind of influence the greater themes of life, they move slower, so they're really impactful when we talk about, you know, larger transits and larger life themes are in air and fire. They move from water and earth, which is like way more deep and maybe not stabilizing, but just like a completely different energy than air and fire. Air and fire is fast. We think about wildfire and the fact that air feeds fire, and there's a quickness and an intensity to it. So with those outer planets all being in air and fire, what happens in July is there's this star that's activated. So we have Jupiter that's been moving through Cancer, which has been really lovely, quite nice and even stabilizing, I think, in a lot of ways for all of us. But it's now moving into Leo. So the end of June, right before July hits, we have Jupiter entering Leo, and what it will do is it's going to activate all of the outer planets. We also have, at the end of June, this conjunction between Uranus and Mars beginning. It exacts on July 4th, which is interesting. That's
Mm-hmm.
the birthday of the US, and not that everything's about the US, because it's definitely not, but like we do have this pretty strong evolutionary, like it's almost like this torque, this evolutionary force that what we're navigating, going through being in our Pluto return and things like that, is that we're, influencing a lot of the geopolitics and greater experiences on this planet. So July starts fast and heavy, and then it just continues. Now there's a lot of auspicious and like supportive energy there. Things that maybe have felt stagnant or have been kind of in your psyche or floating around might start, igniting around that time. It can also be quite destabilizing with something like a Uranus and Mars conjunction, because Uranus is fast change, Mars is looking for, especially in Gemini, it can be like a little unhinged, a little unpredictable. So once again, that air and fire, Mars is fiery in a mutable sign like Gemini, it's going to be interesting. So I think, overall, and then we open eclipse season mid-July and officially ignite it mid-August. So the energy's building in June. We're kind of preparing the field for a lot of these very fast, quick changes and shifts to occur in July. August, eclipse season, of course, happens. And yeah, it's just different for everyone, but I think, like, especially when we're dealing with Gemini, we're dealing with Leo, there's a great focus on identity, sense of self, the ego, the mind. Gemini, communication, travel, all of it is very, very intense and fast. So there's a lot of heat here. Egos can clash. If you've been doing this work, though, maybe this is like the perfect time that things start to really like click into alignment, or something super random and left field comes into your life, and things just move faster than you expected them to.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely sounds wild.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when we hear about all these like astrological happenings, so it's not just in astrology, but a lot of things out on the news, instead of actually giving into fear, more giving. It's not also about bypassing and only trusting, but giving into fear won't help us. So even, let's say, astrologically, with all the shifts that are happening, what would you say, even in regards, again, coming back to the somatic practices, can really help us to stabilize our own system? Because we won't be able to change whatever is happening outside of us, but to stabilize ourselves and have that inner foundation, what would be your go-tos?
I love that. Yes, I think that we always have, even though there's a lot of swirl, and this is going to be a swirly summer and, fun and expansive, but also swirly. We always have free will and choice when we're engaging with these energies. So we get to choose. I think the stabilizer is that we get to choose how to engage with it. We get to choose how we resource within these experiences. We get to choose how we structure our lives. We get to choose the practices and the rituals we incorporate. So I've been talking about this for a long time because I knew that this time was coming, and it's like, return back to the basics. Like you said, just simplify. I think Uranus and Gemini, we had a taste of it last summer. It's fast, right? It's chaotic. So what we need is to slow down our own life, our own nervous system. We need to be able to, when we think about our own range of regulation, or like how safe are we feel in our bodies at any given moment, we need to work to increase that capacity to feel safe even when there's chaos. And so I like things I'm doing right now, what I'm recommending for my clients is simplify. If you have a million things planned in July, maybe think about trimming some of that, or creating, even if you can't, right? Even if it's like work related or whatever, or family related, can you book in a lot of space for you, a lot of space for self-care, for swimming, for grounding, for spending time in nature, for slow mornings, whatever it is, right? Wherever you have space, can you book that in ahead of time for July and August? I'm already like booking sessions ahead of time with my somatic practitioner, just knowing I'm going to need that support. Being pregnant, knowing there's like a lot happening, I just feel like I need even more support, through this time. And so really preparing through my resources and thinking about like, what is resourcing for you? What is supportive when, things are chaotic? What do you return to time and time again? It can be so simple. It can be cutting out caffeine for the summer, or it can be a specific drink that you make every morning that you love. It can be a practice. It can be a prayer. It can be daily walks. I love walks. I think that they're incredible. And that bilateral movement is so regulating too. And other things, I would say, just like simplifying. Literally, I can't keep coming. It's like just returning back to the things that are grounding, rooting, resourcing, taking care of your body. Like if you know something's activating for you, if you know that inflammatory foods create more stress in your system and you love them, but like it's just not the time, to be like adding extra stress to the body. And then maybe if there's something fun or exciting you've been wanting to do, this is also a good time to do it. I think Leo is a lot about joy and pleasure too. So incorporating that in, or being open to it. And last but not least, leaving room for pivots. So don't get too attached to anything this summer. If you have travel plans, if you are, wanting to launch something, just be open to the pivots. It doesn't mean you have to throw any of your plans out the window. It's just literally maybe building in more security for changes, or having a second or third plan in place too if something doesn't work out. Just it's like rolling with the punches. I think adaptability is everything moving forward, as we move through these wild times.
Yeah, that's so true. As everything is speeding up, being adaptable and being open to change as well, which is not always the easiest task.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I really believe like even now with all the changes that are happening in the world and even astrologically, something that I often reflect on, that I do believe all of these modalities like yoga, meditation, different systems of astrology, why is there such a more, let's say, uprise of it, is because it's so essentially and it's so needed, and it comes back as a support for us moving now into the times that we're moving into, and coming back to the wisdom of our body, coming back to all these ancient systems, practicing that. And not everyone can find their own way. For me personally, it's yoga, what grounds me every single day, and meditation. But even with that, I know there are so many modalities. You can do breath work, you could do yoga, you could do all of these things. But even in that, simplifying that and sticking with one thing that supports you, or maybe even two, but not doing too much, another sound healing, another breath work and all of these things, but really even there, choose wisely what really supports you.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like, if you know something works for you and it feels comforting and it's a resource, it's like, it doesn't have to be complicated. There's enough processing and flying around and floating around in the field right now. We're evolving the ways we need to, but just returning back to the body and letting the body is really the part that struggles to integrate these faster times. So just tending it, and like you said, bringing it back to what's supportive and resourcing for you in particular. Yeah, I love that.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful, inspiring conversation. Are there any last words that you have, or anything that's maybe on your mind, on your heart, where you feel you want to share that?
That's a great question. I think it's kind of what we ended on, which is just that these systems, as you mentioned, are ancient. And, in this, we're in a time of such duality, right? With Uranus and Gemini, and that's just going to be further and further sort of magnified in the world. And we're speeding up everything, and technology is advancing. And we're going to be in 5 years probably like talking about time travel like it's no big thing. It's like, this is AI, right? Things like this, that these technologies are advancing so rapidly. And at the same time, on the other side of the spectrum, there are systems and tools and resources that are so simple and so old and so ancient. Herbalism, working with earth medicine, working with the body, being in the body, yoga, astrology, like these things are so old and they're just as intelligent and just as wise and just as advanced as these new technologies and new systems that are being developed. So I would say if you're diving into those pieces and parts, AI, whatever it is, right, make sure you're balancing it enough with these old ancient systems that are just as much wisdom to give too, you know?
Yes.
And yeah, I think, I mean, as a Libra, it's always like balance is key. So
Yeah.
it's always my medicine is like, if you're speeding up, if you're very fast, if you have an incredibly exciting summer, amazing. And can you leave enough space to really return back to the things that are simple and that bring pleasure and joy and safety to your system too.
Yes. Thank you. That was a really good point.
Yeah.
So how
Thank
can
you.
people connect with you? I know you also have a podcast, which I forgot to mention in the beginning, but
Ah,
Soul Archaeology.
yeah. Thank you.
Um, yes.
Yes, I love podcasting and it's different than yours. You know, it's not conversations, it's just like a weekly astrology update basically. So we're talking it comes out every Monday and we talk about, you know, what's the week ahead look like? What does the month ahead look like? So it's that's Solar Archaeology in all platforms. That's a great way to connect. Also Instagram, Substack. My Substack is called Along the Spiral. It's Ali Ofstedal. My Instagram is just Ali Ofstedal as well. And those are the two places that, you know, where I provide most of, you know, updates and resources and things like that. So it's a great place to connect with me.
Perfect. I will link
Yeah.
everything below so people can easily find it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you so much
Thank
for being on
you.
here, for sharing all of your beautiful wisdom, and I wish you a beautiful day.
Yeah, it was so nice to see you. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you.